You're listening to That's Pretty Dark,
the podcast where we talk about all of the entertainment that scared us as children
and still haunts us as adults. So grab your flashlight and join us as we take a frightfully nostalgic look over our shoulders.
And under our beds.
And in our closets.
And together we'll realize, whoa, that's pretty dark.
That's pretty dark.
Man, there are so many ways I want to open this episode. Like, there are so many ways.
There's so much happening right now.
I want to talk about how I don't have to be on jury duty next week, which is just such a huge relief because I already don't have any time.
The relief of canceled plans times like 1,000.
But I feel like the thing we should say is Dan Schneider.
Yeah.
And
Schneider.
Brian Peck.
Yeah. Brian
that
Peck
piece of
and
shit.
What's his name? Jason Handy.
All of them. Oh yeah, that dude too. All of them.
This has been a really heavy week for 80s and 90s kids. With the release of the Quiet on Set documentary on Max. I'm going to call it HBO Max forever. I'm sorry. That's just what it is.
HBO.
Yeah. It brings up a lot of really dark, heavy stuff from our childhood and not the fun kind.
Not
the fun kind at all. It is
They talk about it like ruining your childhood. It didn't quite ruin it for me, but there are things that I have not reckoned with yet.
Well,
that are still kind of bothering me.
Being on the internet for the past decade, you do learn things, and I knew a lot of what had happened with Dan Schneider, but
you told me
Schneider
about it.
If you haven't seen the documentary, and it's like, I feel so weird about all of it, to be honest with you, because it's not even just like a true crime. It's like, I don't want to say, oh, I'm not going to spoil it for you. I hate treating it like content that's like we're eager to consume, because it is a tragedy on all fronts. And that the whole thing just feels super weird to me, and I don't know how to talk about it or navigate it, but I do know that obviously it's very close to the subject of our podcast, although, a whole different, much darker path.
Very adjacent, yes.
I'm sure that there are darklings out there who have been watching it or who might be looking to us for some kind of commentary or comment on it in general. And I think you said it best when you said Dan Schneider. The whole thing is so sad and
just real scum of the earth type.
Not even just for the actors, but for the families that, were impacted by it. And I was talking with a friend about it this week, and I don't know if you saw this, Christian, but Dan actually released a video on his YouTube as like an apology. Yeah. It was like a 20-minute interview, quoting, with everything vetted by him prior and totally designed to spin everything in his favor.
I didn't watch it because every time there was some like egregious thing that happened and they showed the response that he gave to that particular claim,
they would give the statement.
Just totally dismissed every single thing.
It's all
he also deflected blame and dispersed blame on everyone else and said, I wasn't the only one.
Correct. And that's what he did throughout the 20 minutes of the video that he posted. So TLDR for any
that's why I didn't watch it, because Dan Schneider.
I wanted to see, what he would say and if it would be consistent with that, and it was, unfortunately. And when I was talking with my friend about it, we were describing it or talking about it like, okay, yes, you've had that response in your back pocket for a decade now, 2 decades, about how it wasn't me and everything went through, all these executives, and it was approved multiple times, and there were multiple people on set who could have said something if they were uncomfortable, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So he's been passing that buck now for a long, long time. But what he fails to do in that is own, the things that, like, he apologized. He had some I'm sorry in there, but only the things that he literally couldn't get out of because there was video evidence of it happening.
Right.
Those are the only things that he really didn't try to get out from under completely. And what my friend and I were saying about it is, like, he was basically the steam engine. He was the train of this culture. Yeah. And of course, he even said, like, I didn't hire, Brian Peck. I didn't hire these people. I didn't have control over salaries. Well, in the moments at the time, you were in a skit with Amanda Bynes on the Amanda Show, and she said, can I have a raise? And you said no. Like, I know that you played it for jokes and laughs, but, like, you were the producer, as Jeanette McCurdy would say in her book.
The creator.
Yeah. You called the shots. You did this. You were the steam engine that kept the whole thing running on Nickelodeon, all of those shows. And what he did was say, oh, I was a victim of it too. I was just, it was just part of, like, what we were doing. We wanted to make great kids television, and that's what we did. He was saying if anybody was uncomfortable, he reiterated that. If anybody was uncomfortable, they could have come forward. So what you wanted them to do was throw themselves in front of the moving train.
Mm-hmm.
You wanted someone else to throw themselves in front of the moving train that you were driving.
Yeah, the people who tried to were rolled over.
Right, dismissed. And that happened multiple times.
Fired, yeah.
So it's more than obviously just Dan Snyder. It's definitely the culture of the whole thing. And I'm grateful that we're part of a generational culture shift in listening to victims, believing victims. We will always do that. Both of us, that's very important to us personally.
Sure.
Yeah. And the whole thing has just been... It's heavy.
It's a bit much. It's a little bit too dark.
Yeah.
If you will.
And it's hard to, growing up with some of those shows, I'm the same age as some of the actors and, Drake Bell, Alexa Nichols that they interviewed. And it's really hard to imagine that the childhood that they made so, look so fun and funny at the time. Amanda Show was one of my favorite shows growing up. All Me that too. Even.
Yeah.
It's just sad what they were dealing with behind the scenes.
And we all shared that experience together growing up with this stuff. And that's why you're all here listening to our show as we talk about it.
Yeah. We're here for you guys. We're here for anybody that is a victim, has been a victim of any type of sexual assault, but also just abuse in general, emotional abuse. It's all very real and very terrible. So
yeah, he may work again. He may never. Hopefully not. But Brian Peck still is working. So if you see him out there, give him a swift kick in the nuts.
I don't know that he is now. He was as of...
Yeah, as of last week, he was.
I think it should be impossible for a registered sex offender to find a job in any proximity with children. But hey, apparently that's just me. I don't know how that works.
They're supposed to be, yeah.
Ooh,
buddy. Well,
we are here to talk about the lighter side of the darkness, honestly.
Well put.
Things get dark and heavy, but in a totally different way. And
in a very
here
controlled
to celebrate
manner.
Certain aspects of that. And we hope that you all are ready to do that with us and to appreciate, the pieces and parts that we're able to outside of all of that.
The more nostalgic bits.
On That's Pretty Dark, our show, where my name is Kaylin.
And my name is Christian. Well, let's shift gears and get to the meat of tonight's episode.
Something that is highly requested.
Little Nemo, Adventures in Slumberland.
Just so highly requested. You guys on Instagram have been freaking out about it, which is so exciting to us anytime a topic is, tugs those heartstrings for y'all.
I don't know if I've said this before. I'm sure I have. It's not just one of the most requested. It may be the most requested.
It's up there. It's definitely up there.
For sure.
I think it's another one of those where people weren't entirely convinced of what they saw.
Yeah, fever dream.
And because I think we'll get into this, but I think it might have to do with the fact that there were other pieces of media with this character floating around in the zeitgeist, throughout our childhood. Similar to Casper, as we talked about with Casper.
Oh, yeah.
So there might be a level of familiarity even if you didn't see the film in the 80s.
This is a children's animated fantasy adventure about a boy named Nemo, who is invited by royal decree to the kingdom of Slumberland, a wondrous place of fantasy and expectation that may or may not live only in his dreams. When the jolly King Morpheus is kidnapped by Nightmare, Nemo and his friends must travel to the land of Nightmare to rescue him from the dark clutches of what may be fear itself. This was released on August 21st, 1992 in the U.S.
Guess what else happened that day?
You came from whatever dream realm and entered this boring, terrible, awful Earth realm.
I was born.
We keep talking about the year, things come out the year we were born, but this is
the day that I came Earthside.
It's unreal.
August 21st, 1992.
It's pretty cool.
So this movie and I have the same birthday. This was the day that it released in the U.S., correct?
Yes,
is that right?
The U.S., but it originally released 3 years earlier on July 15th, 1989 in Japan.
Right.
That's right, folks. We have our first anime.
We do. Isn't that wild?
That's Pretty Dark.
As I was watching it, I was like, we haven't talked about really any anime thus far. And
what's funny is people pitched this to us as an anime, and that kind of turned me off from it.
Same.
I'd never seen it.
Yeah, I think we've said before that neither of us were really into anime for different reasons, I think.
I'll talk a little bit about it. I've been into some.
Yeah.
But before we do that, I think we should define what anime is, if possible.
Let's shall.
My best effort. According to Merriam-Webster, anime is a style of animation originating in Japan that is characterized by stark, colorful graphics depicting vibrant characters and action-filled plots, often with fantastic or futuristic themes. But, according to Wikipedia, it's any and all animation produced in Japan. So, as I understand it, outside looking in, it's Japanese animation, but once inside the world of Japanese animation, the whole business, the industry, there's a lot of debate about what qualifies as anime within the anime world.
They like
Anime
to gatekeep
inception.
their anime, I guess.
Right, they do. And I've known a lot of people who have gotten pretty upset when you claim this thing is anime, that thing's anime, and they get, pretty bent out of shape about how it's not technically. So we may have some people who feel strongly about what defines anime, and they may take umbrage at us calling this anime.
Yeah.
But if you look it up, this is discussed on a lot of anime forums and websites and articles and such. It's out there. Like we've said, I'm not really an anime person, but I do like animation.
Same.
A whole lot. So I know that I've enjoyed some things that are at least anime adjacent, like Studio Ghibli or Ghibli, Cowboy Bebop, Dragon Ball Z, Pokemon.
I was huge into Pokemon.
Oh, yeah. I used to get up at 6 a.m. before school to watch Pokemon, the new episodes that would release.
Yu-Gi-Oh!
Yeah, Yu-Gi-Oh! And there are others that are more heavily debated because they're more American made, which is Avatar, The Last Airbender, and Samurai Jack. I've heard that these are not anime, but then some people do claim that they are, so I don't really know.
We're sure you have opinions, listener.
Yeah, so we're just doing our best. It's all animation to me. But as with many of the films we've covered on the show, especially the animated ones, the production story here is a complicated one with a lot of butting heads, conflicting visions, and contradictory directions. There were numerous people brought in over time to salvage the project and make something meaningful that would appeal to both American and Japanese audiences.
That's my understanding of it.
Yes.
That it was kind of trying to be both.
Absolutely.
It wanted to straddle a line.
It did. That was the whole point. But therein lies the main issue, which we're going to get to in part 2. But in brief, it was in development hell for the better part of a decade, beginning in 1982 and not releasing until 1989.
/92.
/92. 89 the first time.
Yeah.
Like, that's crazy to me because most studios today would kill a project after just a couple years. I mean, 7 is unthinkable.
Right. I mean, something might sit on the shelf for that period of time, but it doesn't usually swirl around in pre-production for that long.
Or post-production.
With like
Unless you're James Cameron.
Or post-production. Like actual conversations being had about how to get this done.
So if you already know about some of the powerhouses involved in the production of this film, you may be asking yourself, why was this the hill they were willing to die on?
This being this plot line, this movie.
Right.
This content.
Yes, this IP. And that has everything to do with the cultural significance of the comic strip it was based on.
Here we go.
So that's where I think we should focus our attention tonight.
I'm going to teach a lot of people a lot of things, I think.
Hop on your flying beds, y'all. We're dreaming about
my cats are flying around the house right now. If you can hear just the pitter-patter of the
on their little kitty beds?
Little feet. Yeah.
That's so sweet.
They're hopping in their kitty beds and going for an adventure.
Little Nemo Adventures in Slumberland is based on a weekly comic strip from the early 1900s by the incredibly talented and renowned Winsor McKay. This was called Little Nemo in Slumberland, believe it or not.
Shocking.
It features the character Nemo dreaming up all sorts of fantastical predicaments, typically ending with him getting into trouble for waking up his parents, often by falling out of bed. The whole opening sequence of the movie is a perfect, if not sensationalized, reimagining of what one of these strips would be like. You know, being chased by the locomotive, you know, falling, and then falling out of bed,
that whole
tangled in the sheets.
It felt very much like a dream.
It did. That comes directly from McKay's work. He did that over and over and over.
That like inherent, like you're being
brilliant.
You're being pursued by something. You're being tugged by something.
Yes.
You're being chased by something. All the above, like that feeling of being like that.
Not to mention the falling,
a dream, and then falling. Exactly, like the momentum of a dream.
He pulled a lot from real life dreams,
Mhm.
which is, I think, why it became so popular.
I was going to say to you just about that opening sequence. It reminds me of dreams that you and I have talked about where we're trying to get into our house to get away from something.
Oh,
like we're
yeah.
trying to get to our
He
door.
is going
we can't
toward
get
his
the door.
house.
He's going into his house and we're trying to
Dude.
get the door open. And
Yeah.
that like delayed response that you have in a dream where you're like, I just want to do this thing. And you can't quite get there.
Yeah.
That whole sequence felt like that to me.
You know, we'll talk about the movie. We'll get to it next week,
Yeah.
next time, obviously. But his mom, even when he's trying to get his mom to
Yes,
answer him,
in
and she
that
doesn't turn
sequence,
around.
She doesn't turn
that
around.
was so creepy.
It
to
felt
me.
like that is how a dream
was
feels
so
when
creepy.
you're like trying to get the attention. You can't get them to turn
Yeah.
around. And then the only thing, because I had not seen it, prior to watching it for this purpose.
No, I watched it just like 2 days. No, last night.
The only thing that I could think was like, please have a face when you turn around. Please have eyes. Like, I don't like
do this to me.
this
Don't
suspension.
do this.
Like, it's terrible. So I felt that too.
So the life of the comic strip spanned the years of 1905 to 1927, but it's not all so simple as that. It first ran in the New York Herald from 1905 to 1911, so the Herald owned the copyright. But then McKay was offered more money to work for the New York American, which was owned by William Randolph Hearst. And McKay won a lawsuit that allowed him to use the same characters under a different name in the Land of Wonderful Dreams, which ran for the New York American from 1911 to 1914. And then, like 10 years later, when McKay returned to the Herald in 1924, which was the Herald Tribune by then, the comic ran once again under its original name until it was canceled in January 1927
Wow.
due to a lack of popularity in the Art Deco scene.
It just didn't fit in anymore.
Didn't fit in.
But that's a long run for a comic. What did you say? 1907 to 1927? Or
1905.
1905 to 1927.
Yeah.
It's a good run.
And he later went back to work for Hearst again, but the comic was no longer popular enough to revive. And the Herald Tribune sold the copyright back to McKay for the token fee of $1.
Nice. Well done, McKay. He waited it out,
He got everything back. So who was this Winsor McKay fella?
I don't know, but I think you're going to tell us.
If you ask comics historian R.C. Harvey, he was the first original genius of the comic strip medium.
Wait, R.C. Harvey. So I assume no relation to the Harvey brothers of like Harvey Toons of like Casper fame.
Oh, not that I found. No,
What are the odds?
Different guy. Still a cartoonist, still an artist like a comic, but more of an author and a historian.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to get excited about that, but
Winsor McKay is considered a pioneer of both the weekly comic strip and hand-drawn animation for film. He never completed grade school, but he once had a teacher that nurtured his passion for art and drawing. We need teachers. Let's pay teachers more.
yeah, let's do that. Please.
That's a good idea.
If we made the decisions, teachers would be at the top of the food chain.
But not eating people.
Not eating people, just teaching them.
Yeah. But McKay seemed to just be naturally gifted at not only detailed drawing, but drawing from memory as well. So by age 17, he went to Chicago for more art lessons, where he found work and honed his craft, drawing advertisements and posters for lithography printing companies, dime museums, and carnivals and circuses. Dude,
That's awesome.
Dude cut his teeth on literal 19th century circus posters.
That's so cool.
That blew my mind when I read that. I was like, that makes sense, because I looked at a bunch of his work, and to me, it has that old-timey circus poster feel, especially when he's trying to throw a lot of detail and like animals and chaos at
It's so
like, the dream
interesting
sequences.
how that, like the stylistic ideals of that time just kind of wind themselves into all of the artists of that time.
Yeah.
It's very cool.
So cool. It was so cool to me. I got dinner with my friend Christian, and that was like the first thing I told him. He was like, "How was your day?" And I was like, "You wouldn't believe this. I was researching this comic artist, and man, he like drew circus posters."
I wish I could do that. I'm so, we talk about it all the time. I'm so jealous of anybody that can draw.
Oh, right. I know. Well, yeah, just that well. Like, and again and again and again, the same thing.
I
over
know,
again.
because they were like
I can, but it
machines.
looks totally different.
You see like ads in like newspapers and stuff, from that time period. And it's like, oh yeah, this was all hand drawn.
All hand drawn.
Just reproduced over and over, hand drawn.
It's a discipline that very few people really
Wild.
no today.
Mm-hmm.
But I was so interested in all of this that I wanted to follow the threads from these origins to his art style in the comic, because I wanted to really understand or know how much of it carried over into the film from the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And spoiler is a whole lot of it carried over to that film.
Wow.
But we're going to get to that. So I looked a little deeper into dime museums and the lost art of circus posters. Because I wasn't readily...
Of course you did.
I wasn't readily able to explain what a dime museum was. So I needed to look it up to make sure, my understanding was correct.
Fair enough.
But dime museums were a lowbrow form of entertainment and quote-unquote moral education for the working class, especially in areas with high immigration populations. They were vaudeville-era venues that offered edutainment around the clock, including all manner of stage performances from music to magic, from ventriloquists to wax figures, from sideshows to freak shows.
So kind of like an open mic.
Pretty much like an open mic. And not only did the great Harry Houdini get his start in open mic dime museums, but P.T. Barnum himself bought Scudder's Dime Museum in New York in 1841 and turned it into Barnum's American Museum.
Nice.
And if you immediately think of things like the Fiji Mermaid, yes, you're correct. That's it.
Wow.
And Barnum, I used edutainment because Barnum had a hand in coining the term edutainment.
And that's still used today.
Yes, it is.
Makes sense, though.
And there was this one article I read on circus posters that had some really good insight from a circus poster collector, which, how cool is that?
Yeah, why aren't you one of those?
Named Pete Hine Out. And it made me really just want to go start looking for circus posters and collect them.
Takes me back to our We're Back coverage, because it was all that style.
Dude, for real.
Mm-hmm.
For real.
The Nightmare Circus. Truly capturing the multitude of the circus is no easy feat, which is why circus posters have a variety of styles. Naturally, there are depictions of acrobats, clowns, and animals, but not necessarily all together on one poster. Sometimes several different poster images were used at the same time to communicate the different parts of a circus, a trick modern-day marketers would likely reject for lack of brand recognition.
We get that.
Yeah, I understand. Headlines written in bold type and colorful font were all methods used to excite potential customers. They were also early examples of stylized printing techniques with the use of lithography, which gave circus posters their vivid, colorful look.
So let's keep all this in mind as an aspect of McKay's brilliance and his approach to illustration. The cerebral style and nature of Little Nemo is often indistinguishable from the rather psychedelic art style of circus posters, depicting lion tamers, fire breathers, sword swallowers, and acrobats.
And I'm imagining, too, as it was saying, as you're walking down next to a circus or a sideshow somewhere, you see one poster that has, the lion tamer. You have one poster that has the fire breather. Each act is kind of represented in a separate art form.
Dude, yeah. Hell yeah.
Part of it, like it says, would be tough for brand recognition, but also it's making me think there's no Photoshop. You know what I mean? They probably needed to have them individual acts on individual posters just in case they added or changed acts.
Right.
You know what I mean? If they had them all together in one, you couldn't edit
If you can't do that this weekend because the lion has a little splinter. That's the word.
Thorn?
A thorn in its paw, and the mouse hasn't come to get it out yet.
Yeah.
Then the lion won't perform
this week, so they can just take down his poster and put up the bearded lady, which that's all kinds of messed up. But that's another episode.
I love it, dude. Hell yeah, man! This is the coolest shit. I've been living in this circus poster mindset for a few days now,
I do
and it's
love
just
the
best
idea
thing.
of circus.
It's one of my favorite things.
You'll know.
And it's important to point out that not only does this give McKay a chaotic edge, to his work, but it also gives an incredibly enticing edge.
Mm-hmm.
Because the whole point of posters and advertisements is to immediately arrest the attention of the average passerby.
Mm-hmm.
And in McKay's case, specifically to appeal to audiences of all ages.
All ages and all classes, I guess. People that didn't necessarily have the funds to spend on it, but you were still hoping that they might.
Gather round,
Wouldn't it be great
step right
if entertainment was not inextricably linked with abuse sometimes? Wouldn't it be great?
That would be really fantastic.
That's a theme that we're noticing, huh? Because we say we love the circus culture, but you want to talk about a culture of abuse.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that under there, too. But if it were the idealized idea of a circus, count me in.
No blood packs.
No,
No signing
none of
that little
No
contract.
animal abuse.
Mm-mm.
Although it's not really possible to treat animals like that, keep them confined and on the road, etc., without some element of something unnatural to that animal. But
Yeah, go listen to the 10 Stories album by Me Without You.
oh yeah,
It'll
that's
make you
one of your
rethink circuses.
faves.
God, it's the best thing in the world. Speaking of things that are problematic and uncomfortable,
Ruh-roh.
McKay's list of early comics include A Tale of the Jungle Imps by Felix Fiddle,
Oh yeah, we got to talk about it.
which was a problematic strip based on a series of racist poems written by George Randolph Chester. I do have here that I will talk about these so-called jungle imps later. It makes me uncomfortable to say. It is what you're thinking. It's a tribe of African human beings.
It's a really poor racist depiction of.
It's a really terrible depiction. Yes. So we cannot forgive him for that.
No.
Even though he was from a quote unquote different time, it's unacceptable.
It's different time.
What's
or
the word?
not.
I read a term that was gentleman colonialist or something like that, where it's like
racist, but
white but racist. You
Well,
wear a suit to work.
there's not usually a but in the between of that.
No, I know. It's just like.
But he wore a suit to work. Yeah, I see.
He
what
wore
you're
a suit
saying.
to work. He was married. He had children. He survived in polite society, but was xenophobic.
But polite society was a whole lot different then too. Thankfully, we've come a little bit further
rampant
than that.
xenophobia and racism.
Yeah.
Just have to call it out. And I do talk about this later again, but I don't want to get too caught up in the weeds.
That's what we're doing today. Yeah, we got to make sure that, we say this all the time as we're, approaching these dark subjects. We can't not call out the terrible bullshit. We have to
avoid
we
it.
have to call it what it is, but we don't want to act like it didn't exist either.
To avoid it would be actively whitewashing the history.
Right.
And we're so against that. It's not even funny.
Yeah, for sure.
So, yes, A Tale of the Jungle Imps. Ugh.
Icky. Really icky.
He also had Mr. Good Enough, Sister's Little Sister's Beau, and Furious Finish of Foolish Philippe's Funny Frolics, all spelled with the PH.
Nice.
So,
Alliteration.
whimsical guy, clever, funny,
And a little racist.
if not a little racist. And when McKay started at the Herald, his first successful strip was Little Sammy Sneeze, in which Sammy would sneeze with such force as to wreak havoc on the scene depicted in that week's strip.
Yikes.
Usually resulting in him getting literally kicked out of places in the final panel.
Wow.
And this ran from 1904 to 1906.
So it's like the Tasmanian devil, but
with sneezes.
with COVID.
But with COVID. Yeah. Yes. Or with whatever I have right now.
Again.
I'm sick again.
Ick.
And as McKay is gaining the trust of his editors and his publishers and making a name for himself, he once drew a strip about a man stranded on the North Pole without his cigarettes, only to awaken with the realization that it was all a dream. And his editor loved the idea of exploring dream sequences. So McKay developed a second strip in 1904 called Dream of the Rarebit Fiend. Now, a rarebit is a Welsh dish comprised of seasoned cheese on toast.
Yum.
It's cheese toast.
I love cheese toast.
It sounds great, I know.
Give me. I wish.
But you'll have bad dreams if you eat it.
Well, yeah, you might.
So
You might have more than that if you're me.
I know you're you. Or recently, me.
Fun.
This comic features some random person dreaming up bizarre or unsettling things after eating a rarebit and falling asleep. To give us an idea, Wikipedia says, the dreams often reveal unflattering sides of the dreamer's psyches, their phobias, hypocrisies, discomforts, and dark fantasies.
Ooh.
And you can buy this online, and I'm about to. I'm about to get me a copy. I cannot wait to read it. But decidedly, all this, not for children.
Ah, okay. There's a dividing line here. These are comics for grown-ups.
At least this one is for sure.
Okay.
It gets pretty dark. Nevertheless, on December 10th, 1904, one of the comics featured a little boy named Nemo. And something about this character must have stuck with McKay, because less than a year later, he dreamed up a whole comic dedicated to this character, Little Nemo in Slumberland. Another version of the same thing that would be much more appropriate for readers of all ages.
Okay. Nemo was the gateway. Nemo brought him down to the younger set.
Yes, absolutely. Expanded his audience, perhaps. And also making this quite possibly the first ever example of a spin-off series.
Wow.
Pretty cool.
So you said that the editor was really interested in these stories that ended in, it was all a dream, that whole idea. I can't imagine, you said this was early 1900s. He wouldn't have been the first to do it.
Right, no.
But maybe an early adopter of that whole trope, because that's a very common trope in media that we see now even. You wake up and it was all a dream.
Right, yeah. Hitchcock loved it.
Yeah, very Hitchcock.
The Twilight Zone did it a few times. My dad loves this trope. He's tried to get me to write it into something before.
You wake up and it was all a dream.
I was like, okay, a little bit overdone.
It means you can get away with, anything you want. So I understand why it's a really popular convention in fiction, but
sure. No, but it's funny you asked that because that's my very next note, because I think that was my exact thought was he the first one?
Gotcha.
Actually, no. McKay wasn't the first comic artist to pull inspiration from dreams. Before him, there was Charles Reese, who had done Drowsy Dick's dime novel Dream.
Oh,
sounds like a porno.
Dreams. It absolutely sounds like a porno.
It should be adapted. Rule 34, that needs to be
Are you going to take over on that front?
No, I'll leave that to the professionals.
Okay, fair enough.
There was J.B. Lowitz, who had Swifty and Wonderful Dreams. And more to the point, there was the French comic Little Lucian in the Land of Dreams, which McKay appears to have
Is there some plagiarism afoot?
Borrowed heavily, nearly frame for frame.
Oh dear, Mr. McKay.
In the very first episode of Little Nemo.
And to think that I thought, hopefully maybe, the only thing we could say negatively about you was your racist beliefs, but alas.
But at the time, a lot of people were borrowing comics left and right. So I don't know if it was socially, culturally unacceptable or if it was just outright plagiarism. I don't really know.
It's hard. I don't know, when
it's hard to say what the culture was
like. You would be able to copyright a comic and say
that too.
And especially across from France to America, he sees something French and he runs with it. Like we see examples of this even today, where people just kind of steal ideas for content or ideas for hooks and certain things.
Sure, it could have also been another word for it is an homage,
right?
A nod. So you don't know. I don't know if it was intentionally nefarious.
I'm going to take this and run with it on American soil,
or if it was like, oh, we're doing a whole brand new thing here. Let's just nod at this French
comic that did this,
that people love,
right?
To let them know what we're doing here, and then we're just going to branch off from there,
right?
I don't know
that can
which
be
one
valid.
it is.
It's really hard to say when you get into the stickiness of the IP and what's what originated where. It's really hard to do.
It would
just ask Ed Sheeran
or Michael Scott, but it would be kind of like finishing a movie with "It was all a dream" and then someone accusing you of plagiarism.
Right.
It's like, no, I'm paying tribute to a trope.
Thing people do. Yeah, the line between original idea, thought, and concept that can't be quantified, gripped, grabbed, copyrighted. That's tricky as an artist, for sure.
So, possible that he drew a little bit of inspiration from these comics, if not overtly, absolutely did. But he was likely most inspired by a 1902 novel by Harold Orrin Cummins called Welsh Rarebit Tales.
Oh.
About a series of people who eat the dish, fall asleep, and have bad dreams.
Oh, okay. So it wasn't even the worst. The worst plagiarism wasn't even from France. It was this Welsh idea.
So it's almost,
If he was gonna do it that way, why didn't he just call it cheese toast and save everybody the question?
I don't know. I should have.
If he was gonna make it American, you know what I mean?
I should have made this more of a point. I did read that there was a belief in European circles or in the culture of Europe that eating cheese on toast would give you bad dreams. It was sort of in its own way a bit of a wives' tale, a bit of folklore.
Yeah.
I don't know what the word is for that.
You gotta wait 30 minutes after you
before
eat.
It's
a superstition is what it is.
It's a superstition. There you go. Yeah, wait 30 minutes to an hour before you go back to swim, or the leeches in the
lake will get in Lake Lachrymose. That's what you're thinking of, isn't it?
Lake Lachrymose, right.
I could see it. I could see the wheels turning.
I saw Neil Patrick Harris's face and I hated it, and I was like, where's Jim Carrey?
Where's Jim Carrey?
Where's Meryl Streep?
Emily Browning.
So one article about Winsor McKay by Kjell Nuttall, I think is how you pronounce that.
What a name.
Says, Although McKay wasn't the first comic artist to take inspiration from dreams and nightmares, his imagination and superb drawing skills took this concept to a whole new, unparalleled level. So he said, I see what you kids are doing. I'm going to bring this to the adult table.
Okay.
And have a glass of wine. You sparkling grape juice drinking little mofos. Why am I thinking of Thanksgiving? What is this?
I couldn't tell you.
Don't know. I'm hungry. But Nuttall postulates why the general public was especially ready for a couple really kick-ass comic strips to explore the subconscious through dream symbolism.
Audiences were swept away by the captivating visuals and mesmerizing epic tales on a grandiose scale. Both comics followed in the wake of Sigmund Freud's psychoanalytical books such as Interpretation of Dreams in 1900, which sparked public interest in dreams and their deeper meaning. As such, McKay's comics were considered very topical. Children could relate to the overpowering dream worlds in Little Nemo, while Dream of the Rarebit Fiend delved into more adult fears and sexual undertones. McKay depicted many recognizable nightmares like walking nude in public, dying, going to hell, falling to your doom, losing body parts, morphing into something else, being chased or eaten by animals or monsters, and more, it sounds like.
Mm-hmm.
Readers of Dream of the Rarebit Fiend sent in examples of their own dreams, which McKay sometimes adapted into an episode, crediting the reader in the final panel.
And I think that's super cool.
That is really cool.
Yeah.
People on TikTok could do that today and just blow up. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's a concept that's timeless.
Mm-hmm.
That whole idea.
That same exact thing happened for the guy who made Skinamarink.
Mm-hmm.
He got to start making horror short films based off of nightmares and whatever that people sent him to make into short films.
Yeah. Wow.
Which is kind of cool because I was also in it never launched, what was going to be a web series called Slumberland. That was the same concept of every episode was a new nightmare.
A new nightmare.
And Jesse was going to have people send nightmares in and all this stuff and base episodes off of that same concept.
It's so interesting because nightmares are such a personal thing to people because obviously you're going to see things and have things happen in your nightmares that are very specific to your life.
Right.
But then we also know from the years of doing this podcast that there are a lot of different fears and phobias that are very common among people, enough so that they have names and diagnoses associated with them. So when you think about it that way, our collective consciousness, we're not that different. Like these things really just show us how alike we are in our humanity.
Right.
The fears, desires, everything else that we have just kind of swirling in our head. And I think that that's part of the reason why any concept like that probably gets a lot of traction because people, they want to be validated. They want to hear, okay, it's not just you that's afraid of this thing.
People can relate to
this is scary. You're right. This is very scary.
And the director,
I can see that being really cool.
The guy who made Skinamarink was Kyle Edward Ball.
Okay.
Kyle Ball.
Now we know.
So I just wanted to say his name because I talked to the guy, that dude.
That dude.
So yeah, all very cool stuff. I'm really I like all this. I'm feeling all this. This is a fun episode. I'm really glad that we get to cover this. So
don't you think so, listener?
Thanks for, I'm having fun.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks for all the dozens of people who asked us to cover this. So, because I wouldn't have known about it. And now I'm kind of obsessed with it. So
new hyperfixations developing. Right in front of your ears.
Better than hyperfixating on my existential dread and my inevitable demise.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Good stuff.
Don't I know it?
The temporary nature of my existence.
Don't I know it?
So whereas The Rarebit Fiend is an anthology series with standalone episodes, Little Nemo is a serial that expands the world and expounds on the characters and themes from one episode to the next. Keeping the protagonist of each comic the same character allowed for more exploration of dreams and dream logic from a fantasy world-building approach. Where do we go when we dream? Slumberland. Well, Slumberland is a kingdom ruled by the Greek god of dreams, King Morpheus.
Makes sense.
Which means there must be some kind of law and order, right? So what are the rules of this dream realm? But more importantly, what are the consequences of breaking these rules? And that isn't to suggest McKay was concerned with moral as much as he was interested in irony. puns, paradoxes, the humorous side of warped dream logic.
Very Labyrinth, very Dark Crystal, very...
Also very Pinocchio, in a way.
Very Pinocchio.
It makes me feel like if Collodi had been born a generation later and in New York City, the adventures of Pinocchio would have fit right in among popular comic strips at the time. Apart from the circus poster aesthetic, McKay was inspired by the Art Nouveau movement that had become popular around the turn of the century, which essentially means he was interested in detail that would allow the strips to come off as natural, dynamic, fluid. He experimented with panel sizes to help convey things like perspective and pacing. What he did was, instead of making the strip conform to the standard layout of panels, he made the layout conform to the action in the strip. So this allowed him to convey proportions and even fluctuations in proportions as it moved through the story, which, when it comes to depicting dream experiences where things often change shape and size, that would be a pretty nifty skill to keep in your back pocket.
And it's sounding more at this point like a manga or a graphic novel.
Absolutely.
The panels are just kind of suggestions.
McKay had such a new and chaotic approach to comic strips that for the first 5 months of Little Nemo, he captioned each panel in his own handwriting and numbered them so that the action could be more easily followed.
Makes sense.
And speaking of his handwriting, that's the number one gripe of all of his critics. Despite his quote unquote otherwise flawless work, as R.C. Harvey put it, he had horrendous handwriting. Harvey said it disfigured the work. Like, the word he used was disfigured it.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's harsh.
It's bad. I mean, it borders on illegible at times.
I wonder why he didn't
bad.
Hire a copywriter to do that part.
A calligraphy artist?
Calligraphy.
Calligraphist? Calligraphisting those comics.
Oh, man. Disfigured
This episode. But one of the things McKay did best was color, which he used imaginatively to further convey the psychedelic nature of dreams. Color is something he'd probably been obsessed with since his advertising days, because the lithography process allowed the color in the circus posters to really pop. That's why they were so, drawing and, alluring. And, wow, look at that.
Step right up.
And I sure would. Tell you what, I sure
Me too.
would. And again, he was so specific and detailed that he annotated notes on color schemes for the printers to make sure that they got it exactly right. Like, he was scribbling in the margins to be like, make sure you do this, make sure you do it like this. He had a vision. Exactly. And luckily, the Herald had implemented the Ben-Day lithographic process for color, which is all the colorful dots that we associate with vintage comics. And this helped to advance and enhance McKay's color schemes even further. And a lot of the known information about him comes from an animator named John Kanemaker, or Kanemacher, or Canemaker. I don't really know how to pronounce your last name, but it's spelled like Cane Maker.
We do our best around here.
He's also a Winsor McKay biographer. This dude made a film called Remembering Winsor McKay, and he wrote a book called Winsor McKay, His Life and Art. He wrote about how the ornate architecture of Slumberland, which is a dream kingdom, appears to be styled after the design of a few different architectural feats. The Luxembourg Palace in Paris, the Luna Park and Dreamland amusement parks in Coney Island, which sadly no longer exist.
Wow.
And my personal favorite, the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago. That is the very same World's Fair that brought so many victims to the murder hotel of H.H. Holmes. It always comes back to that, doesn't it?
Always that.
And if you want to hear more about that, go listen to our Courage episode on Night at the Cat's Motel.
Wow.
We break that down.
It's been a minute.
A year.
Oh my God.
It's been a year.
Don't tell me that.
And I think that this last one checks out because McKay spent a few years in Chicago around this time. And even if he'd left before, the World's Fair came, he saw it being built for sure. And I guarantee you he went back for the World's Fair at least one day to go take a look at it.
Sure.
He was only a few hours away in Cincinnati by this point. So
the World's Fair was a big deal for
H.H.
100
Holmes.
years plus.
Oh, yes. For the world.
For the world, the World's Fair.
I mean, he could have met H.H. Holmes. He could have been there at the same time. He could have stayed at the hotel.
I should have known you would get on that kick.
It could have happened.
It could have happened. You don't know.
In the first ever episode of Little Nemo in Slumberland, which debuted on October 15th, 1905, King Morpheus himself summons Nemo to Slumberland, presumably to entertain the princess. The funny thing here is, Nemo keeps disobeying orders and breaking rules in each episode, which results in him waking up from the dream before he can get to Slumberland.
Relatable.
Yeah. It takes him nearly 5 months of adventurous dreams to make it to the kingdom.
Wow.
Which he finally accomplishes on March 4th, 1906.
And by now, hopefully people are invested.
Oh yeah, with any luck. But due to the routine interference of the mischievous cigar-chewing green clown named Flip, Nemo doesn't get to meet the princess until July 8th.
Wow.
4 months. And this is where all the adventures and dreams that make up Slumberland as we know it come to fruition. But a couple years later, on July 12th, 1908, McKay reveals his own Collodi-esque boredom with the universe he's created.
I was wondering.
Whereas Collodi literally murders
Killed
Pinocchio.
his character to get the hell out of it.
McKay simply just destroys Slumberland. Flip comes to Nemo in a dream to reveal that his uncle, the dawn, literally the sunrise,
Wow.
has dissolved this nighttime land of dreams. And there's no telling if he's lying or what, because there are glimpses.
It sounds to me like he is, because I don't think that's his uncle. Don't know that I buy that.
I don't know.
Story.
Haven't read it yet. I plan to. But there are glimpses of Slumberland in Nemo's dreams over the next year and a half. And then it returns for good on Boxing Day, 1909. So, who knows? He is a lying son of a bitch, so there's no telling.
Flip is, yes, definitely that.
In this nebulous 17 to 18 month period, Nemo's dreams take on more of a rare bit fiend structure. He dreams of one-off, everyday, commonplace things, often just exploring Manhattan in some fantastical way. Like, for example, in one episode, he's a giant who can climb buildings and splash around in the harbor. But here's the reason I bring this up. Because this is the period where we get the famous walking bed episode. The bed frame sprouts legs and tramps through the streets with Nemo and Flip riding atop the mattress, which we see, in the movie at one point.
We do.
Sans Flip. Gain goblins. And speaking of bed gimmicks that we see in the movie, at least one episode of Rare Bit Fiend from January 28th, 1905, features the flying bed that he repurposed for Little Nemo. In the last panel shows the character falling out of bed, just like Nemo.
It also was very, in the movie at least, I was not there when these comics were written, believe it or not, but in the movie it felt very bedknobs and broomsticks.
Oh, dude, are we going to cover that one day?
I'm sure. I mean,
I haven't seen it in such a long time.
There's so much to talk about.
But sort of somewhat beyond Slumberland, there were several failed attempts to adapt the Little Nemo comic for the stage as early as 1905.
Wow.
And there ended up being a few modern, albeit small, stage adaptations in 2012, 2013, and 2017.
I had heard of those.
But the most successful was back in 1907, which was an exceptionally expensive Little Nemo stage production that was produced for $100,000, which would be well over $3 million today.
Whoa.
It starred an actor named Gabriel Weigel as Nemo, and I don't know how old Gabriel was, but he had dwarfism, so he was smaller and looked a bit younger. And this played to sold-out houses in New York and toured on the road for 2 seasons, so I guess 2 years. And although it had positive reviews and was considered a success, it wasn't a financial success, which is the ticket.
It is the ticket.
It was too expensive to maintain the show.
It's a bummer. I mean, it sounds like it was a very expensive show to produce.
Yes.
Apparently there were some early stage effects and probably some intricate costumes and such.
One thing that surprised me to learn, though, was that in addition to producing multiple strips a week at breakneck speeds, McKay had his very own vaudeville show which he took on the road with the stage production and performed in the same cities in vaudeville circuits.
Like kind of the opening act.
Well, I don't know if he was on the same stage.
Sure. Not on the same stage, but kind of like a primer. Like, hey,
But,
come see
yeah.
my vaudeville, and probably used it to advertise his.
You're going to go see that show? Me? I'm the guy who wrote that.
I did that. That's me. You should come. It's not a bad gimmick. It's just a lot of work, it sounds like.
I put this here for example, with all this stuff, the advertising and whatnot. I'm going to talk about his son, Robert, more in a bit. But a fun trivia fact is that McKay modeled Nemo after Robert.
Mm-hmm.
So when he would be performing in a new city, he often drew crowds by having his son Robert sit on a throne dressed as Nemo.
Surprised he didn't charge to
Meet.
for meet and greet.
He wasn't quite there yet.
He was thinking that way, though.
And I wondered, like, what could this possibly be? And I thought it had something to do with drawing, obviously. And KJL Nuttall confirmed this. They described it as drawing sequential sketches on a chalkboard in front of a live audience.
That's fun.
I'm sure he took, suggestions or whatever, too, at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But eventually, part of his act consisted of an 11.5-minute long short film called Winsor McKay, the famous cartoonist of the New York Herald and his moving comics, or otherwise known as Little Nemo. And if I didn't know any better, I might accuse him of being a bit of an egomaniac. But I do know better because I know that his understanding of marketing was over-the-top advertisements for circus acts and sideshows.
Right. He needed to brand himself, and he
Right.
needed to be larger than life to fit in with that
Right.
world.
Yes, circuses they're known for their exaggeration.
You don't say.
Just a little bit. But in this grainy, glitchy, black and white silent film, which I watched, Winsor McKay himself bets his colleagues that he can make his drawings move. And so he spends the next month in the film making 4,000 rice paper drawings, after which they are animated in sequence, and thus they move, as 4 minutes of animation. Therefore, McKay wins the bet.
Mm-hmm.
And this is based on a real-life bet that McKay accepted that said he couldn't hand-draw enough images by himself to make up over 4 minutes of animation. So did I say he was a bit of an egomaniac?
Mm-hmm.
My mistake.
Tell me I won't, because I will. If you tell me I can't, I'll do it. Who you calling a chicken?
Who you calling a carpal tunnel hand?
I don't think anyone
I'm getting it.
would be calling him that.
I'm getting it in my wrist from editing
Mm.
with the mouse.
These computer jobs, they're going to kill us.
Especially once the computers become sentient from AI and they attack us.
Right. They're going to literally kill us.
Literally
Then
murder us in our sleep. Yeah.
Mine would if it could. It sure seems like it. All my technology has been revolting. It's almost like a Mercury retrograde or some shit.
And although this concept is clever, this feels like kind of a duh thing today. Oh, I bet you can't make your drawings move. Well, I'll just animate them into a cartoon. Look, they move.
Mm-hmm.
Because animation now is everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, it was not.
Right.
So-
It was a whole new medium at the time. It was
Right.
a eye-opening, world-opening, mind-blowing advent.
Absolutely.
That
It was a miracle.
happening.
It was a miracle.
Yeah.
It was very raw and primitive compared to the advancements made by Fleischer and Disney over just the next couple decades.
Yeah, I was gonna say it didn't take long for them to
Right.
run with it and make things and create things that are still so beautiful, like hauntingly beautiful to this day.
Because these people, these animators, they sat down and they studied the works of people like McKay.
Mhm.
And they said, how did you do that? How can I make that easier and better?
How can I do that better? What can I
Yes.
do to improve this process?
But they were studying him as a genius who
innovator.
brought the impossible to life.
An innovator.
So at this time, very few animated films were being made. And the ones that were made were essentially animation experiments, which is kind of what we're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Or in McKay's case, they were vaudeville anomalies,
Mhm.
spectacles, sideshow acts. It's almost crazy how flippant he was about this groundbreaking work he was doing. And now he's like remembered as this like pioneer of animation. He's just like, I'll just take it on the road. you know?
Right.
I'll go make some money.
Let me see what I can do. Let me push the boundaries and see what's possible.
But that was a few of these guys. For example, here, McKay, he accomplished all of this with the help of motion picture pioneer James Stewart Blackton. And when I was looking into Blackton, he specifically destroyed a lot of his like animation or dismissed it because he thought it was like juvenile. And this guy's like one of the reasons we have cartoon animation.
Father of modern animation.
Exactly. This guy founded Vitagraph Studios in 1897 and is considered one of the fathers of American animation, like you just said, because of his technique of blending drawings with stop motion. By that, I literally mean stopping the camera, like stopping filming, making an adjustment, and then continuing to film. If you know your film history or you've seen the Scorsese film Hugo, then you know that this stop motion technique was invented by French filmmaker Georges Méliès. Georges Méliès.
Which also changed everything.
I want to do something that cutting edge.
I know.
And be like remembered for it
Is
forever.
there anything left that's that cutting edge?
Who knows?
Are we at the end of the timeline?
It just depends on if they're ever going to just, full disclosure on these aliens and start giving us all this technology and see what we can do with it.
That would be super helpful.
Wouldn't it?
If we could get them on board. The aliens, I mean, not the government.
Right. Screw the government. And Dan Schneider.
Dan Schneider.
So like I said, I watched this short. And while it was impressive, and while I did find it slightly hypnotic at times, there are some controversial elements that I want to go ahead and address here.
More controversy. That's just what this episode needs.
Right. I mean, if we're going to sing this guy's praises, then we should at least acknowledge the overtones of racism, xenophobia, and oftentimes misogyny.
Could not agree more. Call it out.
When it comes to the misogyny, I won't really get to that. That's more obvious in his other comics, not One for Children. But he was pretty unhappily married, as it turns out.
Well,
so
who wasn't at that time? And I do mean the women, because on earth.
Why couldn't we give a voice to these women and give them a pen, let them draw some stuff, and tell us how unhappily married they were? Talk about the prisons they were trapped into.
Exactly.
Jeez. So, okay, there were some controversial ethnic stereotypes depicted in the Little Nemo comic that were, for one reason or another, exaggerated in the animation of this 1911 film. One is a nearly mute African character known only as the Little Imp, or Impy, who wears a grass skirt and comes from a tribe of cannibals. And thank Morpheus, this character never made it to the 1989 film. But the other is Flip, an ill-tempered, hot-headed Irishman. The xenophobic issues with the imp are pretty obvious and unsettling. I mentioned McKay, got started in comics with the tale of the jungle imps, so I'd imagine he just felt very comfortable referencing back to his, earlier work, perhaps even sentimental, but this doesn't make it right.
In all of the wrong ways.
Right, it's not okay. This is not okay, and we just want to call that out.
Yeah.
If you have any more input or thoughts on this, then please go ahead, because that's kind of what I got.
I think it's important to, like you said, not whitewash it and not, act like it didn't exist. This was a part of McKay's world and a really unfavorable part.
It has a very Peter Pan-esque slant to it, where, the Native American stereotypes in that story, in the original book, like the original writings, they're literally called savages.
Yeah.
That's just something we're going to have to keep confronting as we go through a lot of the content from.
Oh yeah, I mean, we wouldn't be doing our jobs if we weren't.
Right. So it's not okay. It's not cool. It's ignorance, complete and sheer and utter willful ignorance about other cultures and a misunderstanding
and an inflated sense of one's own culture. I'll say that
absolutely much. It's nationalism, it's white supremacy, colonialism, gentlemanly colonialism. It's bullshit. Blech. All this is bullshit. So yeah, that's where we're at right now.
Make no mistake, listener.
So to kind of take another step into this, because we have to, the issue with Flip is a bit more subtle, but it's still something I noticed right away. And unfortunately, this did carry over into the 1989 film. So Flip, although meant to be a clown, has always been drawn as what one might call a black Irishman. And this awkward, stereotype, whatever you want to call it, is exaggerated further in the 1911 film animated by Winsor McKay. which is an unnecessary choice that is described as a racist creolization of Flip by Mark Winokur in his book, The Politics of Humor, Laughter, Inclusion, and Exclusion in the 20th Century. And as Mark Winokur puts it,
significant is Flip's status as a mixed race or Creole figure. He stands ambiguously between the imp and Nemo. On the one hand, his skin is dark. On the other hand, it is green. On the one hand, his face is contoured like the classic and cliché Irishman. On the other, the lips are exaggerated in size in the same manner as minstrel blackface comic. It might be apropos to point out here that in pseudo-anthropology of the 19th and early 20th centuries, the Irishman was explicitly represented as sort of a missing link between the black and white races.
Proudly Irish over here. But that's really more what I noticed once I started looking into the comics, is that Flip looked to be a character in blackface to me.
Yeah.
Except that it was green face
right.
in this instance. But still, that's what he looks like to me. And I was immediately taken aback.
I was taken aback as well. When I saw it, I was like, what?
I was like, whoa, shut that door. Holy cow.
How are we going to address this? Because, it's...
I was happy to find this article who put it so succinctly.
Yeah.
Because I did not know how to talk about it. But there it is.
It's difficult.
Yeah.
Hand in hand with that is the character of Flip, which I'm sure we will talk about next time more so. But
much more so.
We see this character as kind of a shady, slimy, talk around the issue kind of con man.
Yep.
Which further, emphasizes how problematic this depiction was.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm surprised they just went with it in the movie.
I mean... the 80s were still
yeah.
very deeply buried in a lot of this bullshit. And
I was going to save this for next time, but you said the word slimy. I have the easiest fix in the whole world.
Make him a frog.
Make him a frog!
I thought the same thing.
His name
Why
is
not
Flip!
Just make him a frog?
His
like
name
an
is
actual
Flip!
Animal. This is dreamland. Why do we need, I don't want to say why do we need race? I don't mean that, but like why do we need to make it this really inappropriate
shady stereotypes of race.
Stereotype. Right.
I mean, look at Doug. You know what? Everybody's just a weird different color. The Simpsons did the same thing.
There are all kinds of colors.
Different colors
Doug.
Is great. Color is beautiful. But yeah, why are we giving everything this weird dark slant to a specific color? I don't get it.
Or everything that's, deceptive.
If it's not white, why is it shady and in the shadow and dark? So, man, I don't know. Yeah, make him a goddamn toad. I mean, look, he's chewing on a cigar the whole time. He looks like an amphibian.
Yeah, he does.
He looks
very
amphibious. They
amphibious.
could have literally made him slimy. Give him a slick film on his skin. Like, make it fun.
Yeah.
God, you know what? We have such good ideas. It just upsets me.
No
one's asking us what we want to do.
They certainly weren't in 1989.
Yeah, so cool. Glad we're all on the same page.
Racist is as racist does.
Being stupid. Being dumb.
I don't know that we've ever said the word racist so many times in an episode. Woof.
Woof, yeah. So, from here, McKay went on to make a few other animated films. Much less racist, I think.
Well, that's good.
Well, I don't know if I haven't really watched all of them, so I can't speak to that.
So
but
maybe just as racist. We don't know.
Maybe, yeah, just as ignorant. Some of these were based on Rare Bit Fiend strips, though, such as How a Mosquito Operates, Bug Vaudeville, The Pet, and The Flying House. Some were based on his other comic characters, like Flip's Circus, which I'm sure was racist, and Gertie the Dinosaur, who does appear in the 1989 film.
Yeah.
Remember the big dinosaur holding the big canopy over the band? Yeah.
And I've heard the name as well.
That's because Gertie is very culturally, artistically, and historically significant.
Well, please tell us how.
I will say first, though, there were two that were this significant. The first one is a very passionately animated depiction of the sinking of the Lusitania from World War I, which I think I've looked up before or was shown in a college classroom. The animation that McKay drew of this, because he was so enraged, so infuriated that this U-boat was sunk. But the other is Gertie the Dinosaur, which KJL Nuttall says was the first cartoon with detailed backgrounds. The first cartoon with detailed backgrounds built around the personality of a character. Gertie is also significant as the first dinosaur film and the oldest surviving animated cartoon to star a female character.
Whoa.
Yep.
Whoa.
Yep.
No way.
The first dinosaur film, though, too.
Yeah, that's wild. All of our 90s childhoods say thank you for that.
Right.
Opening that door.
I mean, what would Spielberg do if McKay hadn't done this, back in the 19-teens?
Land Before Time.
We're back.
We're back.
Another word from Nuttall.
His work in the medium was just as groundbreaking as his contributions for the comics genre. His animation was technically skilled with great accuracy in depicting anatomy, perspective, and continuity. McKay used fully rendered characters to move smoothly and realistically.
I read in numerous places that he invented or at least pioneered the technique of in-betweening, which is adding intermediate frames between two keyframes to create the illusion of motion in animation.
It's a big deal.
Big deal. This, in addition to his gift of realistic perspective, has led many artists and animators, like Walt Disney, to credit McKay with making their own work possible. Walt specifically paid tribute to McKay in 1955 on an episode of Disneyland called The Story of Animated Drawing, where there's a dramatization of one of McKay's vaudeville acts featuring Gertie the dinosaur.
Wow.
Canemaker recounts how McKay's son Robert was brought to the Disney studios as a consultant.
Whoa.
And Walt said to him, "Bob, all this should be your father's."
Whoa.
Mm-hmm.
That is high praise from Mr. Disney.
And it's been said that on more than one occasion, Walt himself discussed turning Little Nemo into a Disney movie. And personally, I wish he had.
It is very interesting that he didn't.
Isn't it, though?
I'm sure he had opportunity.
He had every opportunity. Can you imagine, though, if he followed up Pinocchio with Little Nemo and Slumberland?
I can, honestly. And instead of Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, it would have been Little Nemo and Slumberland.
Oh, hell yeah. Sign me up.
You'd be riding on a bed.
But because Walt Disney did not make this movie, the first ever film based on the comic, albeit loosely based, was a 1984 film by Arnaud Selignac called simply Nemo. And most recently, there was the 2022 live-action film called Slumberland, starring Jason Momoa. Also loosely based. And I haven't seen it, and I don't know that I will because I've heard it's terrible.
It has inspired quite a lot of attempts, we'll say.
But the most significant attempt, of course, is the reason we're all here tonight. The 1989 animated cult classic, Little Nemo, Adventures in Slumberland. And this is all thanks to a man named Yutaka Fujioka, who was the president of Tokyo Movie Shinsha at the time. Knowing as much as he did about the animation industry in Japan, Fujioka foresaw certain limitations that he realized could be avoided by entering the US market. So he launched a new animation studio in 1975 called Telecom Animation Film, with plans to co-produce animation alongside the US to be distributed worldwide. And Fujioka believed that the best way to convince an American studio to give it a shot would be to pick something already familiar to much of the world, and perhaps sentimental for an American audience. So he set his sights on a feature-length adaptation of the nostalgic comic strip Little Nemo and Slumberland. And he also liked that Disney wanted to make it but never acquired the film rights. So Fujioka flew to Monterey, California in 1977 to convince the McKay descendants to sell him the film rights.
Wow.
And apparently he was there for quite some time because they weren't convinced until the following summer of 1978.
He had a dream.
He had a dream. And this man was determined. He wanted a film that could compete with Disney, but what he really had was inexperienced animators and a lack of funding.
Heard this story before.
So he had to hire veteran animators from other studios to get a few other projects off the ground, involving now veteran animators Saido Sukiyaka, Hayao Miyazaki, and Iso Takahata. And when pitching to US studios and filmmakers, he screened these films to show the new studio's potential. Look, this is what we can do. Work with us and we can make a movie that just blows the minds of the world.
Avengers Assemble.
Dude, with Miyazaki on your side, how can you lose?
Yeah, how can you lose? How can you lose?
The first person he approached about co-producing, George Lucas.
Oh.
And you know what? Why wouldn't
He
you?
really did have a dream.
Why wouldn't you go to George Lucas? But Lucas took one look at the initial draft, claimed it had a bunch of issues, and declined. So Fujioka then approached Chuck Jones, who also declined. So on the one hand, I find this very surprising because the original draft was written by a young Hayao Miyazaki, which, if you guys don't know, he's one of the co-founders of Studio Ghibli.
Yeah.
Huge deal.
Yes.
So, that's surprising to me. But on the other hand, I don't think his draft had very much to do with the comic at all. And I could go into detail about it, but if you want to get a feel for what Miyazaki's Little Nemo would have been like, just go watch Laputa Castle in the Sky, because he repurposed his draft for that movie.
Oh.
And that's the first of many examples I'm going to give about how these guys just said, you don't like it? I'll make a different movie and show you how good it could have been.
I'll go do my own thing.
And yeah, he did this quite a few times, actually, which is why he's Miyazaki. But I don't think George Lucas totally dismissed the idea, because he recommended his good friend Gary Kurtz, who had produced alongside Lucas on American Graffiti, Star Wars A New Hope, and Empire Strikes Back. But he'd also produced two pretty dark titles, The Dark Crystal and Return to Oz, both of which we're going to cover in future episodes.
They are both on our list and have been for some time.
And when Fujioka pitched the concept to Gary Kurtz said, let's do it.
Finally.
And that's where we're going to continue the production story next time.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
But
we're just getting started there.
But before we conclude tonight, I want to speak a little to the influence and legacy of Winsor McKay. Kind of close this pretty dark chapter. So I found a list of dozens of very famous artists who have cited McKay as a major influence on their work. These are just a handful that meant something to me.
I mean, and you've already put Walt Disney on the list, which is
Walt Disney's number one.
Mm-hmm.
Max Fleischer of Fleischer Fleischer Studios. Tex Avery.
Mm-hmm.
Carl Banks, who wrote a bunch of Disney comics.
Mm-hmm.
Chuck Jones. Martin Landau. Federico Fellini. Maurice Sendak. Art Spiegelman. Alan Moore. Neil Gaiman. And Pablo Picasso.
Wow.
Who, when I thought about that this week, Picasso arguably had a major influence on a lot of the art style that moved through Nickelodeon.
Oh, yeah.
Early Nickelodeon.
Oh, for sure.
So much of it. I was like, oh my God, there it is. I never put that together before.
Yeah. And this is, I mean, it's
and
one of my favorite things that we do.
Freaking McKay.
So-and-so was inspired by so-and-so. I mean, I see threads of this in music that I listen to, artists that I love that are my contemporaries, and they all credit the same, 2 or 3, 4 artists going back generations that inspired them.
Wilco.
And then you go to those people and they all have the same 3 or 4 or 5,
Right.
It's it's fascinating to me how
Absolutely.
Art does move through generations like that.
I love it.
When you find something worth saying, telling, hearing, drawing, doing, and it just, kind of trickles throughout time. It's so cool to me.
Like I said, Maurice Sendak. He pulled inspiration for his In the Night Kitchen. And Art Spiegelman did the same for his In the Shadow of No Towers. The comic was directly referenced in a ton of pop culture, including the song Scenes from a Night's Dream by Phil Collins' band Genesis, A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors, Tom Petty's music video for Runnin' Down a Dream.
There's Tom Petty. Tom Petty's one of the influences that is everywhere.
Alan Moore's Miracle Man, number 4, Promethea, and League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. And of course, Neil Gaiman's Sandman series.
Yeah. I figured that would come up at some point.
Yes.
Save some of that, though, because we have a pretty dark Are You Afraid of the Dark that might also have some ties there.
Oh. The list goes on and on. And on October 15th, 2012, to celebrate the 107th anniversary of Little Nemo's debut, there was a Google Doodle on the homepage featuring their own version of a Little Nemo comic, ending with him falling out of bed.
Nice.
But he also inspired his son Robert, who became a cartoonist in his own right. he was proud of being the model for Nemo and really believed in the preservation of his father's work, which is important because a lot of McKay's originals were destroyed in a fire in the late 1930s.
You hate to hear it, and that's such a common story.
And this happened after his death, which occurred in 1934 from a cerebral embolism.
Ouch.
Yeah.
Or actually, it was probably pretty quick for him.
Emphasis on the cerebral, though, because he had a bunch of comics about dreams.
Yeah, I guess so. Spent too much time dreaming. Overworked.
Is that possible? Well, overworked, yes, but too much time dreaming? And Robert not only literally drew comics in the Little Nemo universe, but he also made efforts over the years to revive and reprint his father's original comics through various syndicates, all without success. And I think he even attempted to put together a comic book, which wasn't even remotely accomplished until 2014, when German publisher Taschen published The Complete Little Nemo, which I've seen online for like $100, and I'm totally going to buy it. It's mine.
It's out there.
There are collections of his other works out there, but there's no one complete, like the complete Winsor McKay.
Volumes, yeah.
Yeah. But I'm going to start collecting.
Sounds like a job for somebody.
It really does. Maybe us.
You want to start a publishing company?
That's Pretty Dark Publishings. That's Pretty Dark Books. Them's pretty dark. But yeah, that's what I've got for now.
Wow.
That's what I have for tonight.
Can you guys believe that we haven't even scratched the surface of all of the nightmarish things to come?
I can't.
In this film.
I can't.
There's so many little surprises, fun facts. And clearly, it's a pretty long production story in and of itself if it started in 82 and wasn't wrapped up until 89, 92.
And the dream began, what, in 1975?
Yeah, 75.
I mean,
so take it back another decade.
Dude, yeah. From Fujioka's, dream, and, 15 years went by before he was ever actually able to see it realized. It's unreal.
We get it. We really understand that.
Yeah, so you know what, guys? If you don't take anything else away from this episode, just don't give up.
Yeah, don't give up on your dreams.
Don't give up.
And there's a couple takeaways here. Yeah, don't be racist.
Don't be a misogynist.
Right in this moment, Dan Schneider.
Don't be Dan Schneider. Don't be Brian Peck.
Man, somebody's going to be listening to this like months from now, maybe years from now, and they're going to be like, what was going on at this time in life? But right now, it's very,
Go
very,
watch
very
Quiet on Set if you want to know.
They're going to be like, who's Dan Schneider? That's right. That's right.
But yeah, wow. So we're really going to get into the rest of the production story next time and the movie itself. So there's a lot of pretty darkness to uncover next time that I know you guys have been waiting for.
So much to look forward to.
And I hope that, like we always say, I hope this is what you guys were looking forward to. Or if you didn't know there was so much background, hopefully it was just as exciting as anything else, because I didn't know there was so much background. This was supposed to be one episode.
I feel like that happens to us a lot, and we're always glad to know more. So,
because the more you know.
Personally, I thank you for your journey into this whole timeline. I think it's fascinating, and it really embodies our whole mission of finding the origins of things, finding the earliest, threads of our pretty darkness in our childhood.
And like I was saying to you before we even hit record, was like, this is just about Winsor McKay, but it's also about the origins of animation, which when I started looking into Blackton and I saw that he was considered a father of American animation, I started to look into the history of animation as an art form, and it goes back thousands of years.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of those things that I want to put a little bookmark in it and come back to it, and I want to do a series on the history of animation.
I think that would be very cool.
On the whole, as an art form.
They love your research projects. Our Darkling friends are big fans.
Well, then start giving to our Patreon and show me how much you care, because you know what? We need this to be self-sustaining. We need
if you guys would do us the honor or would be interested in that, our Patreon, we have bonus content, but more than just the bonus content that you have access to, it also enables us to create the regular content that you have come to love.
Just this right here that you're listening to. Yeah, us being real stupid, being dumb, thinking we're smart.
Yeah, thanks for enabling that.
It helps us think we're smart. Thank you. Patreon.com/TPD podcast.
Yes. You can also follow us on our social media if you want to hear more of us being stupid. That's Pretty Dark Podcast on Instagram. That's Pretty Dark on TikTok. We are out there in the wilds of the internet.
In the ether.
In the ether, just
the pretty dark
hoping
ether.
that our pretty darkness finds the right eyes and ears. And you can be part of that. You can help make that happen by sharing our content or our episodes with your friends. Let them know what you like. Because around here, the more the merrier.
The more the merrier. Join our circus poster.
We'll add you.
We need the chaos. We need the excitement. We need to just, entice all the passersby. Just coasting through the internet, looking for the next piece
Enticing
of just
all the passersby.
Solace and just distraction and just save me from this existential
We
plane
all
of
feel
dread
that existential
and burden.
emptiness together. That is a trademark of the millennial generation, and we're glad to be just a little part of what makes it bearable, because you guys do that for us all the time as well.
Join us on That's Pretty Dark, where you awaken from your nightmares only to realize you're living in nightmare.
Only to realize that it was real life all along.
It was real life the whole time. Together, all of us. Because you're not alone. You're
definitely not alone. Never.
Really.
Never alone, in fact.
Never really alone. Well, thanks for listening, guys. Tune in next time for the conclusion.
We'll be back with part 2 of this exciting journey into dream or nightmare.
Ooh. Slumberland, nightmare. The lines do blur, don't they?
They do, all the time.
They do. A blur.
Thanks for listening to That's Pretty Dark, written and produced by Christian Baxter Mott and Kaylin Andrews.
Our music is composed by Jonathan Simmons, and our art is provided by Paige Garland at Power Girl Illustration.
Join the collective nostalgia and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at That's Pretty Dark Podcast.
Share your experiences and let us know what shows, films, or villains still haunt you from childhood at that'sprettydarkpodcast@gmail.com. Remember, you're never really alone.
So until next time, sweet dreams, everyone.